Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Here's today's prophecy update. Presently, Jews are not allowed to pray or worship on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Many rabbis teach that Jews should not go onto the Temple Mount at all, since they are in a state of ritual impurity. However, Yehuda Glick believes Jews will once again worship there because of his mission to convince Jews to go onto the Temple Mount. Glick was shot 4 times at point-blank range by a Palestinian terrorist. Miraculously, he survived and has now recovered. Revelation 11, verse 1 and 2 prophesies that a temple will stand on the Temple Mount 3.5 years before Armageddon, and that Jews will worship there. Glick is devoting his life to making sure this prophecy comes to pass. Of course it will, since the Bible's prophecies always come to pass. It's just a matter of time. Well, it's your day. It's open line. This is the day that we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. To be on the air with me, the number to call, 877-END-TIME, 877-363-8463. So begin dialing. If you'd like to reach our operators, that number is 800-END-TIME. But to be with me, 877-END-TIME. Well, it's been another interesting week, to say the least, of course. We're closing in on the pivotal time with our election process here in the United States of America. All of us are very concerned about it, and I hope we're being very prayerful about it as well. I am asking God, give us the person you want us to have, not necessarily the person that I or someone else favors, because the Bible says that man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. I was thinking, however, about the possibility of who would become our next president. We know that Super Tuesday is coming up just 4 days from right now, and that probably will decide who the Republican nominee will be. It's almost certain that the Democratic nominee is going to be Hillary Clinton at this point. So, knowing what's coming, who's the likely president that will be elected in November of this year? Is there anything we can know for sure? Well, as I was attempting to analyze this, I began to think about what's likely to happen during this next presidency. We know there are 2 major prophetic events that seem to be imminent. If they don't happen yet in the Obama administration, then it seems almost sure they will happen under the administration of the next president. I'm speaking of 1, World War III, the war that kills 1/3 of mankind. Number 2, a peace agreement between Palestinians and Israelis. So if these 2 things are going to happen, which possible president would it look most likely could participate in these 2 major developments? What kind of a president would somehow become involved in World War III? And What kind of a president could strike a deal in Israel between Palestinians and Israelis? Now, once the deal is struck, they're going to create a Palestinian state, which Netanyahu has agreed to. They're going to put the Temple Mount under a sharing arrangement, which Netanyahu will agree to. Jews that live out in the area where the Palestinian state's going to be founded will be allowed to stay there living as a Jewish minority under the newly created Palestinian state. And then Jerusalem is going to remain under Israeli control. The status of Jerusalem will be put off for 7 years. So, World War III, a Middle East peace agreement. And the other thing we know is that the United States is going to stay faithful to Israel. The United States is going to stand against the world community. Now think about all these factors that we can know from Bible prophecy. And will Hillary Clinton stand against the world community, or is she a believer in one world government? Who on the Republican side would stand against the world community, would buck the tide? Who would participate in a deal with Israel and the Palestinians? And the U.S. will almost certainly be involved in that deal and will play a role in that deal. So how will all this come together? And who will become the next president of the United States? Interesting questions. We are going to go ahead and get to the phones now, and our first caller today is from New Zealand. Alan, welcome to End of the Age.
Thanks for taking my call, Irvin.
Welcome.
Hey, just quickly, your elections are interesting to watch from a perspective from down under, with the debates and everything. We get to see all of that as well. And very interesting to see our media is always spinning a leftist side of things. This is very, very interesting. But I think back to pre-World War II, you had a leader on the scene that was claiming to make Germany great, was going to bring back the jobs and, all the things that they were going to do. Very, very interesting to hear Trump kind of almost the same kind of things, flags in the back and big stadiums and, all the rhetoric. It's just an interesting perspective from a New Zealander looking at your elections.
I think they're looking at this election all over the world right now because America is so influential in our world. But Alan, when we think about it, the prophecies of the Bible, we've got a new DVD out called America's God-Given Destiny. The prophecies of the Bible say that America is going to turn back from her present error of her ways and is going to end up defending Israel, standing against the world community all during the time of the Great Tribulation. So whoever is elected is apparently going to lead America in a good direction from all I can ascertain from the scriptures.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, Irvin, sometimes you look through the things in the scriptures and you read them over and over and over and things never click, and then all of a sudden one day it does click. We're always looking at Daniel, and have done this, the Jerusalem Prophecy College. If there's anyone out there that wants to do that, they need to do that. Book of Daniel is great. I've waited years for that, Irvin, and you have done that. I've enjoyed that study. But, we talk about the visions and the things that was happening in the years of Darius, the king, the Medes and the Persians at the time, but I've never really clicked and seen that Zechariah and Haggai were all having visions and the word of the Lord was coming to them at that very same time. And in Zechariah, we use the 4 chariots for the 4 horsemen, understanding the seals. But have you ever looked at all the other visions that he actually had at the same time? And I'll just quickly list what they are without reading them. And there was the 4 horses, the 4 carpenters, the man with the measuring line, the high priest, the candlestick, the flying roll, and the woman in Ephraim, as well as the 4 chariots. Have you ever looked at all of those pertaining to the end time? Because I know some of them do, but have you ever looked at that? And it was just fascinating to see Haggai was having the word of the Lord coming to him in the same time as Zechariah and Daniel were getting prophecies.
Yeah, I have not really concentrated as much on those other prophecies by Zechariah probably as I should. However, let me point out, Alan, to you and to all of our listeners, that Zechariah and Haggai were mainly prophesying when Zerubbabel came back to Jerusalem to build the temple. And they were preaching, motivating the people to rally around Zerubbabel and to build the second temple. So their ministries mainly fell at the end of the 70-year period prophesied by Jeremiah, whereas Daniel's ministry fell within that 70-year period. We don't know for sure when he died, but probably just 1 or 2 years or 3 after the end of the 70-year period. Yet Zechariah and Haggai were admonishing the people. Haggai in particular said, you say it's not time to build the house of the Lord, but you're dwelling in sealed houses, and yet the house of the Lord lies waste. So this was a very fertile time as far as the moving of God, and it was a time of true revival. And there were many prophets during this time: Nehemiah, Ezra, Zechariah, Haggai, and of course Daniel. So yeah, you're right, it was an incredible time, but I have not concentrated on the prophecies of Zechariah except for Zechariah chapter 6 and the 4 horsemen pulling the chariots as much as I should. And then of course the last 3 chapters, chapters 12, 13, and 14, are explicitly about the very end times in which we're living right now. And it talks of Zechariah being the prophet of Armageddon. And oh, by the way, I stood before Zechariah's tomb last week in Israel, and for the first time in my life, I went inside Zechariah's tomb. We had a man who has a key to the tomb, and I didn't realize how large it was in there. So I had a very interesting experience. It's been 4 or 5 days ago now. Well,
yeah, I've noticed that Daniel was in the first year of Darius, and both Haggai and Zechariah were saying things in the second year of Darius. So I was just wondering whether it's the same Darius or a different one. But anyway, Irvin, one more quick question, and this may sound a little bit curly and from left field, but you know how Jesus didn't know everything in his ministry? There were some things he didn't understand. We can see that in the scriptures.
Yes.
But my question is, when he began his ministry, he stood in the temple and he read from the scroll of Isaiah, and he stopped. The first part he read was about how the Lord would come. It almost seems like the first coming. But where the judgment comes of the nations and the other things, he never gave that part of the prophecy from Isaiah. So my question is, do you think there was a point in Jesus' ministry where he actually did understand that he was not, he just kind of rewind it slightly. Everybody seemed to think that when the Messiah was come, he was going to come, set up his kingdom, and that was it. Well, do you think there was a point in time where Jesus may have thought that, and then he understood that he wasn't going to be setting up the kingdom, that he was going to die and then come back? Or you think he knew that right from the start? And that's my question.
I don't know of any evidence that he did not know it right from the start. Now, you've pointed out something very interesting, and that is that somehow God, even though Jesus was God in human form, somehow God chose to limit himself so that at times he did not know certain things. And he did this for the purpose of putting himself in a position of being our perfect example and being limited. He was able to suffer. He was able to become weary. He wept. So he did have human sensibilities. But here's what we know toward the end, of course. He knew exactly what was going on. He spoke of his death in advance. And then he even knew the day he was supposed to die, because he said, I must walk today and tomorrow, for it cannot be that a prophet should perish outside of Jerusalem. So he was hurrying to keep his appointment with death that he knew was so vital to the entire world. He was the Lamb of God to take away the sin of the world. So, and of course, when he was baptized by John, John actually made that pronouncement, and I have every reason to believe that Jesus at that time, at the very beginning of his ministry, did understand what John was talking about when he said, behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. So I don't know whether I can go all the way back to his childhood days as to how much he understood in those times, but Even at the age of 12, remember, he was in the temple disputing with the doctors and the lawyers, and his mother, they went away, and they realized a day and a half journey away that Jesus was not with them. They had to go all the way back, and after 3 days they found Jesus disputing with the doctors and the lawyers, and his mother said, "Son, why have you dealt with us thus?" And he said, "Don't you know I must be about my Father's business?" So even at the age of 12, he was not a normal kid. He had an understanding of his special mission. Whether we can explain totally exactly everything he knew at that time, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, great. Always good to call in, Irvin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alan. We appreciate you calling today. Let me see. Let's go now. Let's go to California. Dave is calling from California.
Hello.
Hello, Dave.
Hey, how are you doing?
Very good.
The question or comment is pertains about back in Daniel where he wanted to know everything in the future, but that was sealed off for him. That was for the people that would live during that time.
Yes.
Okay. And let's say, for example, the third temple was built today. Now, that's something you can actually see, and you know, well, let's say that was one thing you knew happened.
Yes.
Because you can see it. But you can't see the understanding of being able to understand what's going on in the end times, like Revelation, is something you really don't see. It's an individual thing, I would think. So is that like a seal on everybody or just some of the people at that time? Because the ones that will actually live through, but other people will still be born and dying during that end time anyway.
Well, back in Daniel's time, the first thing you referred to in chapter 12, Daniel had written the entire book of Daniel, and then he was praying to understand his own writings. And the Lord said, "Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end." Mm-hmm. So the early church had very limited understanding of Bible prophecy, at least for a while, because the day Jesus left the earth, the last question the apostles asked him was, "Will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel?" And Jesus' answer was, "It is not given to you to know the times and the seasons which the Father hath placed in his own power. But you go to Jerusalem and just tarry there until you're endued with power from on high." So the Lord did not let them realize at the time that there was 2,000 years left of the church age. However, later on, the Apostle Paul apparently had insights that the earlier apostles did not have, in that he wrote to the people at Thessalonica in 2 Thessalonians chapter number 2, because there were people teaching that the second coming of Jesus was imminent. And the Apostle Paul wrote to them in 2 Thessalonians 2 saying, "I beseech you, brethren, by the coming of the Lord and by our gathering together unto him, that you be not soon shaken by word, nor by spirit, nor by letter, as from us, as though the day of Christ was at hand. That day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and then that man in sin be revealed, the son of perdition." So the Apostle Paul taught them. We've got a long period of time. He also told them, "The Spirit speaketh expressly that after my departure, grievous wolves will come in, not sparing the flock." And he spoke of the great falling away, the dark ages. So the Apostle Paul understood from his vantage point that the coming of the Lord was not imminent, and he also understood that the Lord was not going to come before his death. The Apostle Peter ultimately understood the same thing, because Peter said, "The Lord has shown me that I must soon put off this body." So he knew he was going to die without seeing the rapture. However, now let's come to the end time, and I think that's what you were asking. Now then, we are the people of the time of the end, when the prophecies are to be unsealed. And we know more, we understand more about Bible prophecy than people have understood before, because we are the people of the time of the end, not because we're more spiritual or because we're more intelligent, but because God ordained to put end-time prophecy in the hands of the end-time church as a tool to witness to the world in these times in which we live. And we're going to know many things. We already do know many things. We've seen the rebirth of the nation of Israel, an incredible prophetic fulfillment. We've seen Great Britain, the United States, Russia, all those things are prophesied, and those are the nations that are supposed to be on the earth at the second coming. We now then can see the technology being put into place so that the mark of the beast can be implemented. We're watching everything. We've seen the Chernobyl nuclear explosion take place. We've seen World War II. All those things are in Bible prophecy. So we've seen many things already, but then there are more things yet to come. So I hope I've maybe answered your question. If you have something further, does that help some?
Yes, it helps. Is this, well, the one reason I asked, it was pertaining about my brother, in which he almost became a minister. And, well, everybody in the family wanted him to, but he ended up not to. But he read the Bible constantly, and then I remember seeing one of your lessons, and you talked about this, and I said, because he gets so frustrated about Revelation because he couldn't understand it. And so I went up to him, and I asked him, I said, when was the last time you read Revelation? And he said, oh, I don't read that, I can't understand, I get mad, myself mainly, because he couldn't understand it. And I kept bugging him about, well, why don't you just read part of it? He said, no, I read it all, or I don't read nothing. And I kept bugging him about it, and hoping he would read it and maybe he would understand it. And but he asked me, so he ended up asking me why, and so I told him about, the program, your lesson I saw on it, and maybe he might understand it now. And unfortunately, it wasn't long after that he passed away.
Oh, my.
So I got thinking, well, maybe that's why he didn't read it.
Well, here's what we know for sure. I'm sure you're aware, Dave, that we put out a course called Understanding the End Time. It's 14 one-hour DVDs.
Yeah.
And a person that goes through that course is going to have quite an in-depth understanding of both the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. You can't really understand Revelation unless you understand at least a few of the key parts of the book of Daniel. Daniel 7, where Great Britain, the United States, Russia, Germany are all talked about. And also Daniel chapter number 2, where it talks about the Holy Roman Empire being the last empire upon the earth. Unless a person understands those two things, then Revelation becomes quite difficult. But once you understand those things, when you get to Revelation 13, you see the same symbols used for modern nations, but they've now merged into one power depicting the one world government of the Antichrist. So we do have a lot of things we understand. I think we understand almost all the book of Revelation right now. At least personally, I believe I do. There are a few things that I still don't quite understand, but I would say 80 to 90% of it I feel I do understand properly. So it is given to us to understand in these end times.
Okay, well, that was pretty much in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate the phone call. Now let's go to Gary calling from Texas. Hello, Gary.
Hello, Irvin.
Yes.
Just wondering if Great Britain votes to withdraw from the European Union, how that would affect end-time prophecy.
Good question. And, of course, that vote's scheduled for June the 23rd. This is a major crisis. Here's what we know. We know that there has to be a 10-nation union out of Europe that will be the power base of the Antichrist. The Antichrist will come up among those 10 nations, uprooting 3 of them. So all of us have wondered, since there's 28 member nations of the European Union right now, how are we going to come up with a union of 10 nations? And this shakeup, many people are predicting if Great Britain withdraws, that other nations will follow suit. Now, Great Britain is especially nervous about staying in the European Union because of all the immigration, especially the Muslim immigration that's coming into Europe just like in absolute tidal waves. And so they're saying, look, it's time for us to get out because we're losing too much of our sovereignty. However, what do we know? We know that Great Britain is going to be an integral part of the one world government of the Antichrist, because the Bible teaches the kingdom of the Antichrist will be made up of Russia, the feet of the bear in Revelation 13, Germany, the body of the beast of Revelation chapter 13, and then the mouth of the lion, Great Britain, will be a part of the one world governmental system. So whether Great Britain leaves the European Union or not, I cannot tell you for certain, but I can tell you for certain, that Great Britain is going to be a part of the one world governmental system. That's how much we know for sure.
Thank you very much. That's a good answer. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gary. Appreciate your call. I tell you what, we're getting really close to our first break. All of you that are waiting, we'll be right back to you as soon as we go through this break. But let me stop right now to say to all of you, the prophecies are coming to pass. When you think about us seriously discussing the people presently running for president and understanding what will most likely happen during their presidential administration, and then being able to say, okay, if this is what's going to happen, which one of these hold the positions that will enable that to happen, and can we know from that who's likely to win the presidential nomination? I was going through that process in my mind today, and I thought, oh my goodness, I mean, he's going to have to be strong enough to fight World War III, probably ignited by the present conflict in the Euphrates River area, because that's where World War III starts from. Anyway, when I look at all these things, I realize what critical times we're in right now. And the reason I mention that is because I'd like to invite all of you to join us as a partner with Endtime Ministries. We're racing the rapture. So become a partner with us, because where there's unity, there is strength. To become a partner, call us. 800 Endtime is the number to call. Get on board. Let's do it together.
When current events are found in Bible prophecy, it's astonishing. At Endtime Ministries, we are seeing them unfold every day, and so can you. We've put together a current events in Bible prophecy package for anyone who wants to understand like never before. Irvin Baxter and his dedicated staff have spent hundreds of hours of research and study, and in doing so have discovered that current events in Bible prophecy are telling the same story. These 13 DVDs will prepare you to be ready in this extraordinary time that God has destined you to live. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com and save over 20% when you buy the current events in Bible prophecy package.
America's God-given destiny, breaking prophetic fulfillments, and the Great Tribulation. With topics such as these, you are not going to want to miss upcoming end-time prophecy conferences. Irvin Baxter will be traveling to many cities where he'll be teaching these exciting lessons. To those of you in Hurst, Texas, Sewanee, Georgia, and Brooklyn, Arkansas, he'll be heading your way soon. Come meet our end-time team and other people like you who want to learn what God has in store in the days ahead. View our wide selection of prophecy materials and take end-time lessons home to share with family and friends. Go to endtime.com and under events, click the conference link or call 1-800-ENDTIME to find more details about these conferences. We'll see you there.
If your radio station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com to continue to listen to today's broadcast.
Well, what an incredibly interesting time we're living in right now. And I know a lot of you are wanting to talk about the presidential election this coming Tuesday, so let's talk about it. Now, let me review again. The person who's elected in November will almost surely preside over World War III if it doesn't happen between now and November. So, who's a likely president to fulfill that office during this war that'll kill 1/3 of mankind? And then that president is also likely to participate in the conclusion of a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And the conditions are going to be that there will be a Palestinian state created, that Jews who live out there in the area of Judea will stay living as a Jewish minority under the Palestinian state. The Temple Mount will be placed under a sharing arrangement, and then Israel will hang on to Jerusalem. So when you look at all these factors, and the other thing is, the United States is not going to become a part of the New World Order, because when you look at the combo beast of Revelation 13, which is a symbol of the kingdom of the Antichrist, there's no eagle's wings there. But a chapter before that, you have the eagle's wings defending Israel against the Antichrist, which means the United States does not surrender its sovereignty to the Antichrist and his New World Order. So we have a lot of factors here, and I would love to hear some of your speculation. Let's go now to Oklahoma. Tony's calling from Oklahoma. Hello, Tony.
Hello.
You're on the air, Tony.
Well, I was going to ask you a question about one of these candidates. I'm looking at, you got Donald Trump. I mean, I've watched videos on him as far as his point on, like, he's came out and said he's for pro-choice, and then as he gets into the running for the presidency, now all of a sudden he's, pro-life. And, I just can't really, my gut tells me he's just changing just because he's going after the Christian vote. I mean, have you heard anything on your end as far as where he really stands on that?
Well, I'm really interested in all this. Let's talk about, you've got Hillary, who's almost certain to have the Democratic nomination. You've got Trump and Cruz and Rubio. They're probably, one of those three will have the Republican nomination. That doesn't mean that Casey couldn't come up or Carson, but it would be quite an astonishing thing if they did. So most likely you're talking about Rubio, Cruz, or Trump. Now, Cruz has a lot of the stances that normally Christians would embrace. Very much against abortion, very pro-Israel, right down the line. The only thing that's negative with him is his relationship with the big banks such as Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. His wife is a director with Goldman Sachs. So there's a suspicion that he really is tied into the establishment. Now, on the other hand, Trump, in times past, has been much more liberal. Now, he claims that he's evolved like Ronald Reagan evolved. He claims that he is against abortion now. Is he saying that just to get elected? That's a determination we'll have to see. Is he as conservative as Trump? Doesn't appear he is. Now, here's another huge question that we all have to wrestle with. The establishment has had a stranglehold on the presidency of the United States for a long time, and they've been sucking us slowly but surely toward the one world governmental system. The Bushes did, Clinton did, President Obama did. We've been moving toward this new world order for a long time, and President Obama's been moving us very fast. But it appears that we're going to suddenly break that hold. Who is the candidate most likely to break the hold of the establishment and wrestle politics, American politics, away from those people who've controlled it over the last 100 years or so? Probably that person would be Donald Trump, it looks like. It looks like he has the strength to break away. He's already apparently done it. Now, here's the bottom line. I'm praying that God will give us the person that he wants us to have. who would be the person most likely to perpetrate World War III? I think either Cruz or Trump could do that. Who would be the president most likely to participate in a peace process that would form a Palestinian state and put the Temple Mount under a sharing arrangement? I think that's more likely to be Trump rather than Cruz, because Cruz is so adamant. Really, Cruz takes a more biblical stance that Israel shouldn't give any land away at all. But the head of Israel, Netanyahu, has already openly said that he's willing to create two states for two people side by side, and that there should be a Palestinian state. So which person, if they were in office, would work with Netanyahu to bring about this peace agreement? I think Cruz would just say probably, no deal, you need to keep all the land. And that would be the biblical stance to take. But that's
always been your stance.
Yeah, it has been my stance, because that
so
is
as a Christian, looking at it at that point, Cruz is the better candidate.
Yes, the only question is, who is going to break the stranglehold of the establishment?
Okay, so let's go to that, because Cruz is not getting any money from the lobbyists. He's had like over 800,000, I believe that's what it is, of individuals, give in. I think his average donation is like $63. So he's not getting any lobbyist money like Rubio is.
Yeah, I haven't checked that out close.
Check that out, because because what you're telling me is Trump is more likely to break the establishment. Well, Cruz, the GOP can't stand him because he's not part of the establishment. So check that out, and that way you can share that with your listeners.
Yeah, well, like I've said many times on this program, I'm being very careful, because I do not intend to endorse a candidate. We're talking here about these things so that people can think about them soberly. And I've been very prayerful, because I've told God this morning while we were in prayer, and of course we have our prayer time every single day here at Endtime Ministries. Our first hour is devoted to prayer. And I told the Lord this morning, now God, I'm not wanting who I want who you want. But I will tell you this, Tony, we're going to have a great revival. I don't care who becomes the president.
Oh, definitely.
And so we're not depending on politics for the revival, because I can show you prophecy after prophecy after prophecy that there's a great revival that's going to come to us during this time just ahead of us. And so whoever gets it, and I do pray that whoever God wants will be in there. And it is important, because I do believe America has a destiny to play. And therefore,
I agree.
We want the right person to be in there. So I just think we have to be very prayerful about who we should choose and who God would raise up. The Bible says man looks on the outward appearance. God looks on the heart. And I think each of us have to pray and say, give me discernment of what's really in the person's heart. I think that's probably the thing we have to do.
Amen to that, brother.
Okay, God bless you, Tony. And this is so good for us to talk about these things, because, we all need to be in the fear of God. The Bible says it's not in man to direct his own steps, but the footsteps of a good man are ordered of the Lord. And the scriptures tell us, in all your ways acknowledge the Lord, and he will direct your paths. And so I'm just saying to all of you listening out there, be very prayerful about everything and how all this comes down. And we just need to walk in the fear of God and humbly ask God to give us that leadership that we need. But whether God does that or not, don't doubt it, that we could get the worst possible choice and still have the greatest revival the world has ever known, because Jesus and his disciples lived under a tyrannical Roman government, and yet they had the greatest revival in the history of the world, except for the one that we're getting ready to have. The revival we're getting ready to have will be greater than the revival the apostles had. Okay, let's get back to the phones. Bruce is calling from Kentucky. Hello, Bruce.
Good afternoon, Reverend Baxter. Wanted to ask you, have you considered the possibility that you may be training the two witnesses in Jerusalem?
I have considered this. We have our college there. It was a miracle. We didn't have any money for that. I had to have $1 million in about 16 days. I was praying, and the Lord spoke to me that morning and said, I want you to make a television program called Another Jewish Holocaust Ahead, and ask people to give $500 apiece toward this college. The money came in. It took my breath away. We raised $1 million in about 16 days, and we had never had anything even close to that. And we were able to purchase the property. We've already made up in our mind, whoever the two witnesses are, they have total access to our headquarters. We'll let them use our broadcasting facilities, our television facilities. They'll be writing for our magazine, because these are going to be two true men of God that God is going to send to do this work. So whether we are training the two witnesses or not, I cannot tell you about that, but I tell you this, I definitely believe that we will know who they are and we will work with them.
Yes, sir. Amen. The other question that I have is concerning the beast of Revelation 13. If, in fact, and I agree with you about the wound, the deadly wound on the head, one of the heads of the beast being healed, being the Berlin Wall coming down.
Yes.
Being that it's past tense, is it possible that the merger of these four beasts of Daniel is also past tense? And also, along with that, the question, what I'm trying to say is, do you think that this merger has already taken place, or is it something prophetical still to happen? But speaking of a past tense event with the Berlin Wall. But the other question is, do you think that there is a significance in the fact that is the body of the leopard and the feet of the bear? Like, does the body of the leopard play a role in this end-time world government? And then the feet of the bear play a role, like the feet could possibly be that Russia would be the military might of the world government, so to speak, as you teach that the mouth of the lion could possibly be that the world language being English. And I'll take your answer off the air. Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, thank you very much, Bruce. Good, perceptive questions. I do believe the body of the leopard is significant because Germany has always been the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, and the king of the Antichrist is going to be the Holy Roman Empire reborn. So I do think that's highly significant. Whether the feet of the bear signifies that Russia will supply the military foot soldiers on the ground, I can't address that specifically right now. We'll talk about it more as soon as we get back from this break.
Many people are very concerned about the direction of our country, the United States of America. Some are predicting its demise. But we at Endtime Ministries are happy to announce that there is hope for the future of our nation we love so much. The United States and its special role in the future are specifically prophesied in the Bible. In our new DVD, America's God-Given Destiny, Irvin Baxter explains what the Bible says about the future of our nation and the role we are prophesied to fulfill in the end time. We have dedicated this new DVD to helping the Jewish people. As anti-Semitism is rising rapidly around the world, we want to help them get to safety in Israel. Go to endtime.com and under Irvin's Thoughts, click America's God-Given Destiny, or call 1-800-ENDTIME to find out how you can be involved in this exciting project and receive our new DVD. Let's join together and bring revival to our nation by doing what God has called us to do.
When you talk about the beast of Revelation chapter 13, like we mentioned just before the break, the fact that the body of the beast is Germany, Germany has always been the dominant force in the Holy Roman Empire, and the Bible is very clear that the kingdom of the Antichrist will be the Holy Roman Empire reborn, and it has been reborn. It happened on November the 3rd of 2009. The European Union is the reborn Holy Roman Empire, and Germany is the dominant force in the reborn Holy Roman Empire. Now, how will all this happen? Well, you've got this war that's going to kill 1/3 of mankind, which is going to rearrange the power structures of our world, and that could contribute to what we're talking about here. Now, we're going to pretty much stay on prophecy and on the presidential election today. If you have a question on another topic, you might want to call in after the program. I know that sometimes we have some doctrinal questions and things like that. I don't want to take those calls today. I want to go ahead and stay on our quest here. But if you would like to call after the program, certainly feel free to do that. And that number is 1-800-END-TIME. Okay, let's get right back to the phones now. I hope I answered all those other questions. But let's get right back to the phones now. And let's go to Daniel calling from Florida. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Brother Baxter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Hard to believe it was a week ago I talked to you when you were in Jerusalem.
Yes.
You get around. Say about the presidential election. Last night was the first debate I watched from beginning to end because I knew there was going to be fireworks and I knew they were going to be gunning for Trump, and I think that's pretty much what happened. But it's also getting down to the real serious time, at least as far as the Republican field. And I used to hear in courses I would take or even give, when you squeeze a lemon, you see what comes out, and when you squeeze Donald Trump, you see what comes out. It gets very, almost violent. When you squeeze Ted Cruz, you get moral clarity and facts. And so that's why I lean that way. But with Mr. Trump, as far as him being a Christian, we shouldn't judge and say, well, he definitely is, he definitely isn't. But you can judge them by their fruits and by their words. And he has said so many words that on a day, the next day there's 20 more things to talk about and think about. But at one time he said, he's never asked for forgiveness. And he almost said it proudly, like, I've never had to. I never did. And also when he talks about his polls, he talks about the evangelicals. Well, we know he's not an evangelical, but he talks about the evangelicals love me, and I love the evangelicals. If he wanted to, he could say, well, I am one, but he doesn't. So I'm just going to kind of, to put this in perspective, ask you as the pastor, when you were pastoring every Sunday and probably Wednesday too, if a young man or a middle-aged man came down the aisle because his life was upside down and he had problems and almost crying. Now, of course, it's hard to picture that with Donald Trump, but as a pastor, you would probably say, well, have you ever confessed Jesus as your Lord? Have you asked him for forgiveness? He said, oh, no. Well, then you would then ask him a few more questions about whether he considers himself a sinner or if he's ever sinned. And you would get him to kind of understand where he's at spiritually. But by his words, he is uncovering himself. And I think he's just a nominal Christian by name only. And that's my feeling. Now, I'm not judging him that he's a bad person or he's damned or anything like that, because everybody has a chance as long as they have breath in their lungs. But I just do not trust someone that is kind of masquerading in the circles. Like he was on Pat Robertson the other day, and it seems like evangelicals are going after him in droves. And it's a weird spiritual time that we are seeing right now.
Yeah, Daniel, I've got a lot of people waiting, so let me comment about what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm rambling. So, yeah, that was my point.
Yeah, well, let me comment about what you're saying.
Sure.
If you're picking according to what appears to be Christianity, probably the number one person would not be Donald Trump.
Right.
Now, we know that politics is the devil's method of ruling the world. The church is God's method of ruling the world. And so we're not dependent on politics. we do know throughout the Bible that God would raise up heathen kings sometimes.
Right.
And he used them, such as Cyrus. He used Cyrus to give the command for the Jewish people to go back to Jerusalem and to build the second temple.
Right.
And the big question is, if God is playing a role in this campaign, what is actually going on? And I think that's something all of us are going to have to be very prayerful about. There are some people who would say that none of the people in this campaign would be defined as a biblical Christian if you take a strict biblical stance. And again, that's will open up all kinds of debate. So when we start trying to decide who is and who isn't, then that becomes a matter of a lot of dispute. But the bottom line is this. Frankly, as long as God's person gets it, if God has a person, I'm going to be very happy, even if it's not the one I end up voting for. And I want to try to vote for the one that I think God is putting into that place at this time. That's where I'm standing. And again, I'm being very careful as to what I say, because we've never made it a practice of endorsing candidates on this program. But I will tell you this. It looks like to me probably that this is going to boil down to Ted Cruz or to Donald Trump because of the prophecies and where we're headed. I don't see how Hillary Clinton, now it could take a turn that I can't foresee, but I don't see how that she could preside over the World War III plus the peace agreement. I don't see how that can happen. Maybe it would happen. I don't know. But I see it much more likely to either be Cruz or Trump. Again, God knows that. So we just have to all be very, very prayerful.
Yeah, and I wasn't throwing all that out there to say, well, we've got to put a Christian in. It's just that I think a lot of Christians are being a little bit deceived, and it shows some things about us, I think, that we can get enthusiastically behind someone like a Trump, unless they're being very prayerful as you are. I doubt that most of them are, thinking, well, what does God want in this? I think a lot of people are looking for a leader that, quote unquote, are going to come in and kick butt in the world. You know, like you said last night, well, Vicente Fox spoke up, so now that Mexican wall is going to be 10 foot higher. He just speaks off the cuff, and I think for that reason, I really do agree that Trump is probably a very good candidate to get us into one or more major wars with his mouth.
And he also may be the candidate that would get us out of the world order, the world community, the international community. Cruz may do the same thing. But to me, breaking the stronghold of the establishment is very critical, because we've had, no matter who's been in office, we have the same people running things. Over the last 60 years, over 50% of all cabinet members have come from a private club called the Council on Foreign Relations, no matter if the Republicans were in power or the Democrats were in power. That's the stronghold that must be broken right now if America is not going into the one world governmental system. And that is a very key element, I think, too. Hey, listen, Daniel, got to let you go. There's other people waiting in line, and we're not going to get to them all. Thank you very much for your call, though. We appreciate it. Okay, let's go now. Let's go to Emily, calling from South Carolina. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Brother Baxter. A couple things real quick. I know you're short on time. I think that Obama was put in office to get everything set up for the fulfillment of the fourth seal prophecy, the green horse, where the Muslims would control a fourth of the earth. Because I think he's so partial. Well, personally, I think he's Muslim anyway, but I think he's so partial to the Muslim people that he's fulfilling that prophecy, for that part.
It's a very astute observation, Emily, and I think you're making a very good observation there.
What?
I said I think you're making a very good observation there.
Yeah. Well, that's what I believe. I don't know. And then Lance Wallnau, he believes, which is interesting that you mentioned Cyrus, because he thinks that Trump is going to be an Isaiah 45. It's a 45th president, and he believes he's going to be an Isaiah 45 president. And like Cyrus wasn't a godly man, but he was ordained by God. So I don't know how I feel about that. All I know, though, is I can't vote for a socialist. I just can't. So I will go in, and whoever is the Republican Party, you know, and then I know the Republican isn't, neither the Republican or Democrat are the best. It's a God-driven thing, and it's us on our knees crying out to God for mercy and truly being the light and salt of the earth. So my trust is not in a man.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do my civic duty, and I'm going to vote for a Republican because I can't vote for a socialist. And both Hillary and Bernie Sanders are socialists, so I just can't do that. But
Yeah,
anyway,
well, that's a
so
good
all I have to say
observation.
for that.
And Bonnie, the Bible actually prophesies that the kingdom of the Antichrist will be a socialist government.
That's
because
true.
the beast in Revelation chapter 17 is a red beast. And I'm with you on that, and I don't mind saying that openly. I'm not voting for a socialist. And by the way, some of the Republicans have a lot of socialism in them as well.
Yeah.
So we're just really at a very pivotal time right now, and we all have to be humble. We have to be humble before God and sincerely pray and seek Him, because this is probably our most important election since the founding of this nation. And it is the election that will probably sweep us into the end time, if not take us all the way through the end time. So it is so absolutely critical, and none of us should be arrogant about it or proud. We ought to be really humble about it. For all the rest of you that are on hold, I do ask your forgiveness. I've got a full bank of callers, but we're out of time, and so we're going to have to stop here. But let's be very prayerful. We'll be back with you here on Monday. And of course, that's the day before Super Tuesday. But let's be praying. Pray for the candidates. Pray for God's guidance in your own personal life. And let's ask the Lord to really help us at this time to know exactly what each of us should be doing. I do want to let you all know that, of course, our tour to Israel is now closed. We'll be leaving on March the 24th for our Israel Holy Roman Empire tour. But there's another one going to be coming up the last part of October, first part of November. That'll be Israel only. It'll be a shorter tour. And so if you'd like to start planning right now, don't fail to do that. And, oh, by the way, if you're not yet a partner with End Time, please become a partner. And also, if you're not yet a subscriber to End Time Magazine, what in the world are you waiting for? If you're going to subscribe to one magazine, what should it be? This is the End Time. Subscribe to End Time Magazine. Call us. 800 End Time is the number. That's 1-800-363-8463. God bless you all. I'll be seeing you back here on Monday.
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.